In June and July 2018, the eyes of the world were drawn to the FIFA World Cup in Russia. For once, President Vladimir Putin's nation garnered positive media coverage as the world united in sportsmanlike goodwill. Then, on June the 28th, as the tournament reached its final stages, 2 civilians in England were exposed to an extremely rare, extremely deadly poison. Suspicion immediately fell on Russia as the culprit. But what if Russia is not to blame? The June the 28th poisoning was not the first. Earlier, on the 4th of March, Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia were hospitalized in Salisbury. Skripal is a former double agent who gave up 300 Russian spies to MI6 while he worked for Russian intelligence. The very rare nerve agent Novichok was placed on his front door. Both he and his daughter were discharged after spending 2 months in hospital. Novichok was developed in Russia between 1971 and 1993. Given the origin of the poison and the target of the attack, the British government accused Russian President Vladimir Putin of ordering the assassination of Sergei Skripal. The Novichok used on Skripal was in liquid form, which can remain active for 50 years, posing a threat to innocent civilians in the vicinity. On the 29th of June, Dawn Sturgis and Charlie Rowley were poisoned in Amesbury, not far from Salisbury. Dawn Sturgis died on July the 8th, leaving 3 children behind. In response, British Defence Secretary Gavin Williamson said, "The simple reality is that Russia has committed an attack on British soil which has seen the death of a British citizen." Yet Neil Basu, the UK's top counter-terrorism police officer, said, "At this stage we cannot say with certainty that both incidents are linked." Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov says accusing Russia of carrying out the attacks is absurd. In fact, Russian chemical weapons expert Anton Utkin says both the poisoning of Sergei and Yulia Skripal and the incident in Amesbury could somehow be linked with some sort of narcotics. Initially, Wiltshire police did believe the second pair of victims had been using heroin or crack cocaine from a contaminated batch of drugs. The website Gazeta.ru suggests the British government's accusations of foul play are really part of a theatre of darkness to smear Russia at a suspiciously convenient time. Specifically, after years of bad headlines about Russia's treatment of its citizens and their human rights, Putin's foreign policy and the international activities of his intelligence services, Russia was finally earning good media coverage, thanks to the positive atmosphere surrounding the World Cup and the unexpectedly good performance by its national team. According to Gazeta.ru, the death of Dawn Sturgis came when the World Cup was disproving many of the Western press's scare stories. Furthermore, Channel 1 Russia observed that the incident came as Theresa May's cabinet was facing huge problems. In the space of 1 week, the British Prime Minister published her plan to leave the European Union, had to attend a NATO summit, after which she was hosting US President Donald Trump's visit to Britain. After openly criticizing Prime Minister May's unpopular plan to leave the EU, Trump also lambasted her and other world leaders over their contributions to NATO. Describing his trip to Europe, he said, "I have NATO, I have the UK, which is in somewhat turmoil, and I have Putin. Frankly, Putin may be the easiest of them all. Who would think?" The Amesbury poisoning occurred right before all of this, yet Russian state news agency RIA Novosti reports that, based on London's provisional information, Russia is not complicit in the Amesbury poisoning incident. It wasn't an attack by Moscow. However, though Russian correspondents say it was a narcotics incident, the symptoms suffered by Dawn Sturgis and Charlie Rowley indicate Novichok. Sturgis had a fit and was foaming at the mouth. When Mr. Rowley became ill, he was sweating profusely, dribbling, and his eyes were red, pinpricked, before he fell unconscious. They were exposed to the poison after picking up a discarded perfume bottle. British Home Office Minister Ben Wallace says the police are working on the assumption that the couple poisoned in Amesbury are victims of the consequences of the previous attack on Sergei Skripal, but were not directly targeted. Neil Basu says, "Clearly, this is our main line of inquiry. but our investigation must be led by the evidence available and the facts alone. I would need a forensic link to be definitive, but this is a very rare substance banned by the international community, and for there to be two separate distinct incidents in one small English county is implausible to say the least. Nevertheless, Rossier 1 notes that Salisbury and Amesbury are within an 11-kilometre radius of Porton Down, the government's chemical research complex. In the past, it developed bioweapons, including controversial tests on humans. Today, it tests and identifies chemical weapons. It is very possible that samples of nerve agents like Novichok are kept at Porton Down. Nikolai Kovalyov, a former head of Russia's Federal Security Service, says the attacks could have been carried out by a former Porton Down employee, who is continuing with his inhumane experiments on people. On the other hand, former Soviet chemical weapons scientist Vil Mezyanov says Russia has a monopoly on weaponized Novichok. Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova says the whole incident is a dirty political game. Of course, it is noteworthy that it is only government-owned Russian media and officials who are suggesting Britain murdered one of its own citizens to distract from Theresa May's bad press. Furthermore, Russia seems to have given up denying they were behind the assassination attempt on Sergei Skripal. Indeed, on July 19, 2018, British police announced they had identified Skripal's poisoners. They said the pair entered the UK shortly before the attack and left immediately afterwards, and were most probably Russian. But they were not known spies or assassins. Experts from the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons are trying to determine whether the Novichok in both incidents is from the same batch. About 100 counter-terror detectives are attempting to establish where the bottle came from. With any luck, no more innocent people are at risk, and political tensions between Britain and Russia will not escalate to dangerous levels. Do you think Russia was behind the poisonings in Britain this year? Please let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, then please don't forget to like, subscribe, click the bell icon to keep notified of all our latest videos, and consider supporting us on Patreon. See you next time!